What's up, friend? Welcome back to my channel. Look, you cannot talk about reality TV history without talking about The Real World. To this day, it's the longest running program in MTV history, and it really launched reality TV as we know it. The concept was simple. Each season of The Real World was going to be
the true story. True story.
7 strangers picked to live in a loft
and have their lives taped.
To find out what happens.
What? When people stop being polite. Could you get the phone?
And start getting real.
And while many people in the beginning probably thought that filming a bunch of random young adults in a house together would be boring, shit got very real very fast. As someone who grew up watching the show, probably a little bit too young if I'm being honest, I still consider The Real World to be one of the most raw, vulnerable reality TV shows of all time. I learned so much from the show about sexuality, relationships, politics, addiction, mental health. I could go on, and in fact, I plan on it. Walk back to '92 with me, and we're gonna revisit how the show came to be and some of its earliest, most unforgettable stories. Consider this my first of many love letters to Bunim Productions. Also, if I ever say The Real World, mind your fucking business. Okay, it's hard to say. Say it 5 times fast. You can't. The Real World was actually supposed to be a scripted show originally, inspired by the 1973 PBS special An American Family, as well as shows like Beverly Hills 90210 and Melrose Place. But scripted TV was expensive, still is, and the show's creators, Jonathan Murray and Mary-Ellis Bunim, thought that it would be much cheaper to make a reality show and still be entertaining enough. Season 1 took place in a New York City loft where we watched the 7 roommates tackle issues like homelessness, prejudice, and even violence. In the first 10 minutes, we saw Julie, the Alabaman from a conservative Christian family, accuse Heather, the black hip-hop artist, of being a drug dealer because she had a beeper. And there was our first lesson on microaggressions. I think The Real World also set itself apart from other shows at the time because of the confessionals. Not only were we watching these starkly different people interact with each other every day, we also got their honest thoughts and feelings about the experience along the way. The roommate would look directly into the camera and say something like, "I really didn't like it how David said X, Y, and Z. There's definitely gonna be a problem here." It was like foreshadowing, it was a peek into their individual perspectives, it was like sitting down with your friend and asking them to spill. Confessionals are such a regular fixture in reality TV nowadays and have even been parodied in shows like The Office and Abbott Elementary, and I think that we can thank The Real World for popularizing that. What really cinches the waist for me though, is that first season, the roommates were paid $2,500 to live in this loft for 3 months, and the show premiered 3 days after they moved out. Things moved very fast and on the low. Initially, critics didn't really know what to make of it. It was too fake and contrived to be a documentary, but too boring and uneventful to be a scripted series. Some critics, like Tom Shales from the Washington Post, lambasted the show for casting a bunch of young people who didn't really appear to have real jobs. But the viewers were locked in. It was this sort of sociological experiment where the viewers could watch these events unfold as if we were watching fish in an aquarium. And if you watch the show, you'll see that almost every season's house has a fish tank. The symbolism, the Bunim mind. Out of everyone who's been on The Real World, I think that Tami Akbar, now Tami Roman, from season 2, is one of the most well-known to this day. After spending several months in Los Angeles with 7 strangers, she went on to star in shows like Basketball Wives, Celebrity Wife Swap, and Marriage Boot Camp. And her acting career has really popped off as well. But Tami choosing to come on The Real World was honestly history-shaping because she was involved in the situation that led to the first person to ever be evicted from a Real World house. She also documented her abortion on the show, which, reminder, we are back in 1993 here, so this was a big deal to show someone deciding to get an abortion and going through with it on TV. But let's get into Tami's eviction ultimatum first. Back in '93, Tami was working at an HIV healthcare clinic and singing in an R&B girl group on the side. And she was on the precipice of success when she moved into the house.
Yes, I must confess your love is all that and then some, and never too much and never less, so baby keep it coming, 'cause you're the only one that can love me like the way it should be done. I'm a prisoner of your love.
On the show, she was beautiful, funny, youthful, a little hot, didn't take people's shit, and she almost immediately friend-zoned her roommate, David Edwards. David was a stand-up comedian who actually got on the show by calling in a favor with his friend, Dave Chappelle, fun fact. And he had several issues with his roommates throughout his time on the show. He wouldn't put his Cap'n Crunch away. Another roommate was tying up the phone line when his friend was calling. The roommates all went out bowling without him after he told them to go ahead. Apparently he was joking. But the straw that broke the camel's back was the blanket offensive, okay? Blanket gate. Tami was in her underwear, under her blanket in her bed, when David pulled her out of bed and into the hallway.
No! David! David! Oh my God! Are you crazy?
One of the roommates who was directly involved was Beth, a production assistant from Ohio, and she put herself on top of Tami to cover her up. Eventually, David completely snatched the blanket off of Tami, she ran into the bathroom, and Beth's head got caught up in the chaos. When Tami went into the bathroom, her awkward laughter was quickly replaced by intense fucking rage. She's obviously humiliated. He exposed her in front of everyone in the house, the production crew, and the millions of people who would watch this play out on TV. Meanwhile, David still thought they were joking. I mean, he was laughing, she was laughing, it's a joke. I mean, come on, an underwear set is the same thing as a bikini, right? And David said, look, if you think that being exposed on national TV is a big deal, let me pull my pants down and expose myself too so you can see that it's just a joke. Yeah, full package out. This was not a joke to Tami, nor was it a joke to any of the other women in the house. I feel like this is a pretty universal experience as a young woman. A man does something to make you feel kind of uncomfortable and you awkwardly laugh instinctively because what else are you gonna do? I can kind of see how that concept would be difficult for a man to understand, but as women, we are always just trying to protect ourselves first and foremost, and going back and forth and starting an argument with a man who is making you uncomfortable in that moment doesn't always feel like the safest way to do that. Tami was so upset that she left the house, and when she returned, it was abundantly clear that she and the other women wanted David out. And despite his apologies, it was just too late.
Okay, I pulled your clothes off. I didn't mean anything by it. I'm sorry.
I don't care what anybody else has shared with you.
Okay.
Because if you did it once, playing, joking, because you think it's funny how I'm doing a joke, it's funny. It could happen again, and I don't want it to happen. Now, if you stay here, I will leave, okay?
That means you would like for me to leave the house.
That's how I feel.
So David got kicked out, and all these years later, Tami is still hurt by this incident. On the Real World Homecoming, which was kind of like a Real World Los Angeles reunion that aired pretty recently, the whole cast rewatched the footage, and David still thought that his perception of the whole thing being a joke was accurate. Tami, on the other hand, still felt like she had been violated and humiliated. The whole situation was exacerbated by the body dysmorphia and ED that Tami was experiencing when the original incident went down. I mean, on the show, we saw her get her mouth wired shut to lose weight. So she just didn't want her body exposed like that, and to this day, it is still something that they could not see eye to eye about. Going back to the original season, after David left the house, the roommates took a trip to Joshua Tree where they did some climbing and outdoorsy shit, and Tami revealed that she was pregnant.
We were still on Outward Bound. All of a sudden, Tami says, you know, I wonder if this is good for a pregnant woman.
Are you really?
Aaron was like, are you serious, Tami? And she was like, yeah.
And just as quickly as the pregnancy was revealed, Tami let the roommates know that she was gonna terminate it. And while everyone supported her, there were mixed feelings from multiple people. Beth claimed to have known multiple girls who used abortion as birth control. But the toughest person to tell was Tami's mom. She'd had Tami when she was 15 years old, and they were extremely close. But she was also like, Tami, you're telling me you work at an HIV healthcare clinic with condoms everywhere and you didn't think to take a few? She even tried to broach the idea of Tami going through with the pregnancy and keeping the baby because back in the 70s as a teenager, Tami's mom had wanted to get an abortion. The only reason why she didn't was because it was illegal. Now, she obviously loves Tami and is really glad she didn't have that option. So who knows, maybe Tami would feel the same way. But Tami just wasn't ready to be a mother, so she decided to go through with it. And regardless of how Tami's mom felt about her decision, she was gonna support her. Tami choosing to tell this story on TV was powerful. You see this young, beautiful woman whose life is just beginning, making this really tough decision. And she has all these people around her doing their best to support her while also acknowledging their conflicting experiences and feelings about it. Cameras went with Tami and her mom to the clinic. They were there immediately after her procedure too, and she was out of it and in a ton of pain. She even had to stop and rest on a chair before making it out to the parking lot. And along with the physical pain came the emotional anguish and guilt. Like maybe her body was punishing her for going through the abortion. Maybe it was a mistake, but she'd made her choice and she had to live with it. What we didn't see on the show was that Tami was actually pregnant with twins and faced major complications after her abortion.
When I went in for the first, they only got one. And then I was, bowled over in pain, still bleeding, going through a lot of complications, and had to go back in, and that's when they found that there was a sibling to the original termination. So I was laid up for about 4.5 weeks from taping.
It was the right decision for her at that point in her life, and I feel like it was so important to illustrate this highly politicized issue on TV, especially back in 1993. Seeing a personal narrative about abortion playing out on reality TV, involving someone who, up until this point in the season, most people really liked and connected with, It was huge. And despite getting a lot of backlash at the time for putting her story out there, I don't feel like Tami has a lot of regrets. It doesn't seem like that in any of the interviews that she's given about the situation since. How many people saw this and realized how difficult abortions are physically and emotionally and decided to be a little bit more careful? How many people saw this and connected with it personally because they'd gone through the same thing? To this day, it's one of the most vulnerable situations that has ever played out on the show. And if that wasn't vulnerable enough, just one season later, we would meet someone who never even got to see the full impact that they left on the world. Let's talk about the legendary Pedro Zamora. Pedro grew up in Miami after immigrating from Cuba, and at the age of 17, after donating blood, he found out that he was HIV positive. After graduating high school, he became a full-time AIDS educator, going around to schools, churches, HIV centers, etc., to show people what someone with HIV looks like, how it's contracted, and what to do if you test positive. He talked about it on TV with Geraldo Rivera and Oprah Winfrey. He testified in front of Congress in support of AIDS education. Obviously, here in 2024, having HIV isn't a death sentence. Millions of people live with it every day. But in the early 90s, a lot of people were dying. Even celebrities like the artist Keith Haring or tennis player Arthur Ashe. Back then, the stigma associated with HIV and AIDS was still full force as well, even though we had the research at the time that said that you can't catch HIV by shaking hands or hugging or any of that shit. So when Pedro auditioned to be on The Real World San Francisco, he really thought that he could continue to spread his message even further. He wanted to share his story to help others, and to me, this was a huge sacrifice for the greater good because Pedro was severely immunocompromised. He couldn't catch a cold or the flu without potentially life-threatening complications. So opting to put himself in a house with 7 strangers across the country from where he lived was extremely courageous. Before Pedro moved in with his 6 roommates, production informed everyone that there was someone who was HIV positive in the cast. They didn't say who it was, but on the first day, Pedro shared his scrapbook, which had a bunch of newspaper clippings and photos of his work. And all the roommates seemed to take it really well. They were proud and excited to get to know him, except for Rachel. Rachel Campos, a religious Republican from Arizona, had questions. What did living with Pedro mean for her?
Some people may say, oh, that's ignorant. We all know, HIV can't be trans. But you know what? I don't know. I've never lived with anybody with HIV.
I guess we're gonna agree to disagree.
There was definitely some tension between Rachel and Pedro those first couple of weeks. Rachel felt like Pedro wasn't sharing important information about his diagnosis. Pedro felt like Rachel was probably homophobic and distanced herself from him because she was Catholic and conservative. But the truth was that the two of them had much more in common than they thought, and over the course of the season, they got really close. Rachel even brought Pedro home with her to Arizona, where he spoke to a classroom full of high school students about HIV. Pedro got along with his other roommates really well too. Pam, a medical student, took a special interest in Pedro and his health because the first patient that she ever cared for had AIDS. There's a specific moment in the show when Pedro gets blood work done to figure out his T-cell count. The normal count is over 500 and his was 32. So he basically had no immune system. You know what I mean? He could catch stuff very easily. This put Pam on high alert because despite Pedro playing soccer in the park and working as normal, she knew how serious this really was. This was kind of a recurring theme throughout the season. The roommates had a really hard time coming to grips with his prognosis because of how full his life was. He really didn't seem that sick, and there was this dissonance between knowing that Pedro was sick and wanting him to rest, but also wanting him to live life to the fullest because they didn't know how long he had. At one point, Pedro got so sick that he had to go to the ER for pneumonia treatment, and his roommate Judd went to the confessional, and it was so sad. It honestly still chokes me up to see it to this day because you can just see how much these roommates cared for Pedro in such a short amount of time.
Pedro and I have become very, very close. Pedro's my friend.
What are you supposed to do when your friend's dying? And I'm probably just overreacting. And I'm probably just being paranoid, but what are you supposed to do when your friend's dying and there's nothing you can do about it?
And Pedro going to the ER was really a wake-up call for a lot of them because they finally realized, oh shit, this is real. He's sick, he could die. We also got to see how Pedro's family was coping with his illness when he took a trip home to Miami. As soon as he stepped off the plane, his mom saw just how much weight he had lost. And yes, this was back in the day when you could meet someone at their gate at the airport. Crazy. His sister would wake him up from his naps to take his temperature and make sure he was okay. Like, they were really concerned. During this trip, we also saw how fucked up the American healthcare system is. Not surprising. Pedro struggled to receive care on his trip because he didn't have insurance. He had received Medicaid, but no private health insurance company would accept him because of his HIV status. And to make matters worse, one of Pedro's roommates took umbrage with his AIDS activism and talking about his illness. We can't talk about the real world San Francisco without mentioning Puck, and I honestly don't even want to spend a ton of time on this because it's just a distraction from Pedro's story. Puck sucked. It is what it is. But long story short, too late, Puck was a San Franciscan bike messenger with a penchant for dominating conversations. He and Pedro had tension pretty much from day one when Puck showed up late because he had gotten both hit by a car and arrested that day. There was a lot happening there. It all started when Puck stuck his dirty little fingers into the communal peanut butter jar that Pedro was using. Obviously, digging into the peanut butter with your dirty, scabbed up fingers, after he had just picked his nose, by the way, is gross. All on its own. But the fact that he did that without considering how he was potentially endangering someone who was immunocompromised made matters even worse. And then it was Puck making fun of gay people on a phone call. And then it was Puck interrupting a serious conversation between Pedro and Rachel. Rachel was telling Pedro that she would dump a boyfriend if she found out that he was HIV positive, and Pedro was disagreeing. Well, Puck walked in and started talking about random shit, completely bulldozing their conversation and ruining any progress that they were making during their discussion. Puck had zero respect for Pedro. He saw him as a pretentious, holier-than-thou kind of person because he'd gone on Oprah and done all these speaking engagements. To Puck, Pedro was just a gay man with AIDS. Nothing more. It got so bad that Pedro gave the house an ultimatum. Either Puck was gonna leave or he was. And although Pedro ended up rescinding his ultimatum and just offering to straight up leave by himself, the other roommates were like, wait, actually, let's kick Puck out. We gotta protect our peace. Honestly, good riddance. Okay, we're over it. Let's talk about the sweetest aspect of Pedro's time on the show, his relationship. We saw him reconnect with fellow AIDS activist Sean Sasser, and we saw their relationship just bloom into something that was so wonderful to watch. First, they're celebrating their 1-month anniversary. Then Sean is taking care of Pedro during his health scares. Then Pedro tells Sean that he's staying in San Francisco to be with him after the show. Then Sean proposes and Pedro says yes. On the second to last episode of the season, they hosted a commitment ceremony at the house, the first same-sex ceremony on TV, and it was a tearjerker.
Feel a connection or a closeness to Pedro that I have to anyone else in such a short period of time. And I don't know what that has to do with, but I know one thing's for sure, I don't want it to go away.
Sadly, Pedro's relationship with Sean was very short-lived. In the months following his time in the house, his health completely deteriorated. When he met up with his roommates that August, his memory was failing, he was having trouble following conversations, he wasn't his same energized, talkative self. They went to the MTV offices and he didn't even know where he was. Shortly thereafter, he was diagnosed with PML, which is a viral inflammation of the brain, and given months to live. He spent the rest of his life in a Miami hospital surrounded by his family. He even received a phone call from President Bill Clinton thanking him for his advocacy. President Clinton's administration then reached an agreement with Cuba that allowed his brothers to come to the US and see him for the first time in over a decade. On November 11th, 1994, the same day as the season finale, Pedro died, and he was only 22. Pedro's life and death changed AIDS advocacy in such a major way. MTV aired a tribute for him, and some years later, Bunim Productions released their first scripted project. It was a movie called Pedro. 4 AIDS education organizations were created in his honor. One of them was the National Pedro Zamora Foundation, which was founded by Sean and 3 of Pedro's roommates from his time on The Real World. Judd started doing lectures about AIDS in Pedro's honor and even wrote a critically acclaimed graphic novel called Pedro and Me: Friendship, Loss, and What I Learned. Pam went on to devote her medical research to HIV, and her work, as well as the work of countless others, has led to HIV no longer being a death sentence. She and Judd's advocacy work actually brought them closer together, and y'all, they are freaking married to this day. We love to see it. And Pedro's love, Sean, continued to advocate on the Presidential Advisory Council on HIV/AIDS under President Clinton, and he continued his advocacy work until he died from mesothelioma in 2013. This isn't even the half of Pedro's Pedro's legacy, and rewatching this season as an adult, knowing how everything shook out, it gives me a new appreciation for Pedro's decision to share his story. He saved a lot of lives with this, and he changed a lot of them too, and I think we should all be so fucking grateful. The real world has obviously never shied away from tough topics, but what happens when a roommate's addiction puts her life in danger? Let's talk about the real world Hawaii and Ruthie alcaide. This is actually the first season that I remember watching live, which is actually crazy because I was like 6 years old. Let's just breeze right by that. Also, shout out to the person who uploaded the full season on YouTube. I will definitely link it down below if any of y'all want to watch. People are really out here doing the Lord's work. Ruthie came onto the show as a fun college student who was just looking to have a good time. I mean, the first thing that she did when she stepped foot in the house was go skinny dipping in the backyard. But even from the first couple of episodes, it was really clear that Ruthie had a tough upbringing. She didn't have a relationship with either of her parents, she fully supported herself, and she liked to drink. On their first night out together as roommates, she had to be carried out of the club by the security guard, and when her roommates got her home, they gave an honest try at sobering her up. She eventually seized, and they had to call 911. All of the roommates were absolutely terrified. One of the roommates, Amaya, she was a UCLA student, she was standing outside of the ambulance just sobbing. It was a really intense experience to have on your second day on the show. Ruthie got her stomach pumped, came home, and had no recollection of anything that had happened. The experience was so bad that she thought that her drink had been spiked. But her roommates begged her to get her drinking under control and pull back. This was definitely a wake-up call, but it wasn't enough for Ruthie to commit to stop drinking. So she kept partying and kept having these incidents that really concerned her roommates. She found a photo of herself making out with one of her roommates, and she had no recollection of it. She gave her boss's girlfriend a lap dance. She got 86'd from one of their favorite nightclubs for pouring water on someone for no reason. I mean, it was a lot. It seemed like every time they went out, she was getting into some shit. Several roommates tried to talk to Ruthie about her drinking. One of them was Matt, a 22-year-old from Southern California. He took Ruthie to dinner and basically just said, look, everyone in the house is talking about your drinking, we're all concerned, and we really want you to stop. And Ruthie took out of that everyone was just shit-talking her. It was very much a situation where Ruthie knew that she was drinking excessively, but she didn't want to let go of the bottle because she could let loose in a way when she was drunk that she couldn't when she was sober. She didn't want to give up that freedom of expression and freedom of self, even though it made her a difficult person to be around. And there was one night in particular when Ruthie's behavior went from bothersome to dangerous.
Are you staying? You don't need a ride? Let's drive.
Ruthie got behind the wheel drunk as hell, and production chased after her. And as production was tailing her, you could see her swerving and almost going off the road.
I'm calling you right now to discuss that.
Yeah, they're all over the road. Look at this.
Hello? Hey, Matt. Oh, yeah. Right. I pulled her aside, and when I asked her who's driving, she said someone. Then she said, Leela, don't do this to me. So I told her, Ruthie, just use your head. She looked at me and said, whatever, and then turned and walked away.
They followed her home, and she made it in one piece, thank God. But the next day, Matt, the supervising producer, had to have a meeting with her. And this was big because seldom was production ever talking to any of the cast members. Production was there to observe, but the drunk driving just pushed things to a whole nother level. Matt told Ruthie that they were gonna kick her off the show if she didn't go see an addiction specialist. This was a tough pill for Ruthie to swallow because she didn't want to be treated like a child. She didn't want to be babysat. She wanted to have a choice. But at the same time, her roommates, and really production at this point, knew that if she wasn't going to get help, she was going to kill someone or herself. So she decided to see the counselor, and this was really the first time that she'd ever been asked to examine her behaviors on a closer level. And for a while, it seemed like Ruthie's situation was improving. Everything was going well. Her sisters even came to visit her. But when they went out, Ruthie fell back into blackout territory. She screamed the whole way home, hit the cab driver, and as soon as she walked in the house, she threw a glass on the floor. And Tech, who was like the free-spirited ladies' man, lost his shit. He screamed at her, called her stupid, called her a bitch. It was bad. Honestly, it just seemed like every pent-up frustration that he had towards her came out in that moment, full force. And Ruthie was not okay. She walked over to her sister's hotel in tears, went out on the balcony, and started talking about jumping.
I think you just forgot what matters. What matters? I don't know. What matters is you have two sisters who love you. That's what matters.
I was speculating if it would be so easy to just go splat everything up.
would be gone and you wouldn't have to feel anything. My sister got scared that I said that. It doesn't matter that Mom didn't raise us. It doesn't matter any of our family wasn't there for us. What matters is me and Sarah are always here for you, no matter what, right?
Honestly, having the two people there who understood her and what she'd gone through saved her life. But the glass breaking incident was the final straw for the other roommates. They didn't even know about the balcony conversation she'd had with her sisters. They were just tired of the drama in the house. So they met to plan an intervention, and they were gonna give her an ultimatum. Either get your shit together or leave the house. Even Ruthie's sisters were down to participate because obviously they had seen that the drinking was getting really out of control, but Matt went right over to Ruthie and told her everything. Matt felt like he was the one person who she trusted and he didn't want to betray her. Also, just knowing her really well, he knew that an ultimatum wasn't gonna work. When the meeting rolled around, Ruthie used the information that Matt gave her about their previous intervention planning conversation to basically put the kibosh on all of their concerns. She told them that she was totally down to chill out a little bit with the alcohol, but she was not gonna quit completely. And she didn't even want to discuss it in that moment. She was just basically letting them know that she was gonna get it together. How specifically? It was unclear. When Ruthie went out with her friends that night, her sisters told the roommates about what had happened at their hotel, and they all collectively decided that getting Ruthie into treatment was urgent. So they decided to go through with the original intervention and ultimatum.
Everyone in this room has become, in some way or another, very concerned for your safety. All of us here want you to get some outside help at a women's facility, a treatment facility for drinking. You will stay there for 30 days. If at the end of that month you choose to come home, you may do so, but you will have to continue to get support. Join a sober support network. You do have choices. You have two choices. Choice number one involves agreeing to what I laid out for you. And choice number two is up to you, and it is that you may move out to wherever you feel more comfortable.
Ruthie straight up said no. She tried negotiating a little bit to see if she could go to the treatment center and kind of check it out and then come home, but they weren't willing to compromise at all, so she moved out. After a few days, she finally did decide to go into treatment, despite still feeling a little betrayed by the intervention. And eventually, she was ready to return to the house. And despite a little bit of unrelated drama, she thrived. She did really well. After the show, Ruthie stayed in the real world universe a little bit. She competed on the challenge. It's still on today, actually. It's like a competition show between former Real World and Road Rules people. Maybe they've added some new people in since then, but I remember when it started, it was specifically for Real World people. I don't know. I gotta catch up, honestly. Ruthie also went around the country giving talks on college campuses about alcohol abuse and her sobriety. She even worked in the film industry, both in front of and behind the camera, and released a hip-hop album, Slay. But it was a game changer to watch a young person struggle with substance abuse on reality TV. Ruthie was a college student who, like many of us, normalized binge drinking because that's just what you do in your 20s. Through Ruthie's story, we all got a crash course on how untrue that mindset is and how alcohol abuse can wreck your life and the lives of everyone around you. And the best part is we got to see her overcome her alcohol abuse and get sober. Honestly, she's an inspiration for us all and one of the most endearing people to ever be on the show. I feel like if you ask longtime viewers of The Real World who their favorite people are, they're gonna say Ruthie. We love to see someone face an obstacle and overcome it. These stories barely scratch the surface of what was covered in those early seasons. We saw roommates experience what happened on 9/11 in real time. We saw faces blurred out because of don't ask, don't tell. We saw the effects of obsessive compulsive disorder and self-harm, pregnancy scares, bitch slaps, I mean, you name it. It was on the show. And all of this was before social media and reality TV fame. There was an authenticity element happening here that is really hard to find in modern shows. I highly recommend going back and watching. Some of the seasons are on Paramount Plus, some of them are on YouTube, uploaded by those brave souls, thank you so much. But it's so cool to just see what people were even doing back then. Smoking indoors everywhere, calling cabs instead of Ubers, no one had a cell phone. I don't know, even if you don't have that nostalgia factor and you didn't watch it back then, it's still still really fun to watch now. They have stood the test of time. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more about reality TV, internet history, and pop culture, I would love for you to subscribe. You can also follow me on TikTok, where I talk about similar stuff, but I'm a little bit more brief on there, you know? I also have a link in the description where you can donate to support the Pedro Zamora Young Leaders Scholarship Fund. It supports the academic pursuits of young activists like Pedro so they can carry his torch and continue to make an impact on this world. See you later, friend.